Hello, welcome everybody. Today I have got another amazing guest, female guest called Jack O'Keefe. Hello, Jack.
Hello, Lisa. Hello, everybody.
So, um, so rather than me doing your biography, because I don't actually know so much about your story, I know Jack from, I think I've mentioned before that I used to be in this group for non-dual teachers, but we don't meet so much anymore. And I knew her before that. I think when I was seeking, also I knew you as a teacher. Um, and I think I saw you on Conscious TV or something. And yeah, so
Like
I thought that
centuries ago.
yeah, I thought we could do a little bit of your story first of all, and how you got into non-duality or spirituality.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this because you said we're going to start with your story. So this morning, and it's morning here and evening for you. I'm in Hawaii. Um, I was thinking, like, is there anything that I haven't said so much or repeated so much on so many different platforms? You know how it is. It's like, God, is there anything new I can offer? Um, and so, you know. I'm going to just take a different angle slightly. And then by all means, Lisa, circle back if you're like, come on, give me like the things that changed your life. And of course I'll go there if you want. When I had started realizing, oh, there's more to this life as an atheist, there's more to than this physical realm. One of the things that happened was one morning I just got this into my head. Oh, go to Glendalough. And Glendalough is an ancient monastic site in Ireland. I was living in Ireland at the time. I'd say I was like 31 or something at the time, and 30 was the big turnaround for me. The first big turnaround. And I went to these ruinous sites and I was like, okay, where am I supposed to go? Where am I supposed to go? So when we're doing things like that, I suppose we're learning about surrender. We're learning that there is a movement that comes from someplace deeper inside. And we suffer when we don't follow it, and we discover it's our ego and our sense of needing to protect ourselves when we like, no, no, I'm not going. I know the feeling is to do this, but no, I don't have the courage. When we block that flow of consciousness that wants to direct us someplace, it doesn't work out as well as what we thought. So I was very much practicing, all right, let's follow the movement, follow the move, what wants to happen here. And I went to a church that's off the beaten track. Now, it ruins of things. I mean, it's like 700 or 800 years old. And from those classic ruins that you'd see on postcards and things, especially from like Western Europe, where there are the walls and then there is the gable wall with that like inverted V. There's no roof or anything, but there's just these rambling stones, uneven wall, and up where the gable wall is, and then the other wall. So I arrived at this ruin. It was called St. Xavier's Church. I was like, okay. It was raining. It was a Thursday morning. It was cold and miserable, like not a nice day in Ireland. I was like, okay, get up on the wall. I'm like, okay, get up on the wall. So the wall was about 5 feet, I'd say, so I can climb up on this old crumbling stone wall. Of course, you're not allowed, but there was nobody there. So I started walking along the wall, and I've always had a horrendous fear of heights, like an unrealistic fear of heights. And I was walking along thinking, okay, I bet what you're doing, Spirit, is like you're making me deal with this fear. Okay, okay, I can do it. If I fall off here, I'm not going to die. There's nobody here. I'll be fine. I'll get up. It's only 5 foot, and there's just pebbles below. I'll be fine. So I started walking along the top of the wall, 5 feet high, meter and a half to convert to European, and and then there was this gap where there was no wall because there was obviously a doorway. Once upon a time, there was a door, and it was quite wide. So I was like, okay, I think I can jump. I'll jump. I'll make it. But the wall on the other side was a little bit higher. And so I couldn't run into it. I was like, okay, I got to jump and land a few inches higher. Okay, I can do this. And I did a jump. 1 foot got on. I grabbed the wall with my hands and I started to fall back. I started to like, whoa, my hands ripped and I was in the air, falling back on one leg, going, because I would crack my head off the wall I jumped off, you see? And so as I was like beyond the point of being able to pull myself forward because my center of symmetry was off, a physical hand came and caught my back and pushed me back up and over onto the wall. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God. So I just stood there kind of shaking, going, okay, thank you, you know, and it's like, I have your back. The universe always has your back. Keep walking. It's like, keep walking, keep walking, keep walking. What? I'm up on top of a wall and there's just the gable high part in front of me. And of course, the voice stopped, the movement stopped. And I was there like, okay. But I was so full of chemicals, I couldn't feel the movement. I couldn't feel what wants to happen here because when we're full of fear, mind is in charge, nervous system is in charge. So I kept walking and I walked up on the gable and I stood on the top. Now, this was quite high. This was like a dangerous height. I was like, oh my God, the fear is gone. The fear is gone. It's gone. I've no fear of heights. Look, I'm not dizzy, nothing. And I walked down and I was like skipping along the top of the wall and I happily went home. Um, Things like that happened. Things that were beyond normal experience. And I think, you know, because I was so much on one track and my rearing was pretty rough, as a lot of people's were in those days, because children didn't have rights, we didn't have a voice. There was no place you could go, there was no child line, there was no support services, there was nothing way back. And so, you know, when there was abuse in households and violence in my home, um, you could do nothing about it except I just have to wait till I grow up. I have to wait till I grow up so that I can just leave. I have to wait till I grow up. So a lot of that was playing, I suppose, you know, around like my survival instinct became very strong because I have to make sure I get out of here and I make a life for myself and I'm not dependent on anyone. That was very much kind of in my teens. And when I was 30, my third eye opened all of a sudden. And that was the big whammy. And I was like, somebody's popped me LSD. It felt like LSD. That's what we had in those days. Um, for, you know, other than weed and dope it was, you know, LSD was what was popular. And I thought, I'm tripping. And the friends who were with me is like, Jack, what are you saying? What's going on? Like, we didn't give you anything. Why would we give you something? You know, we're gone beyond that. We're 30 years old. Um, and so I saw dead people everywhere. And what had happened was that I suppose a dimension that's quite dense and close to this 3D dense world, that was the first one I could access. And the barrier or the boundary between this world and, I suppose from a Catholic sense, you might call it purgatory. It's like a place where stuck beings weren't free enough to move on
Mm.
to for their own evolution. And we all get stuck sometimes. We're stuck in some belief system, stuck in something, you know, stuck in feeling a particular emotion. And it's that type of thing that also happens when we don't like when we're not free enough to go with death and really let it elevate us. And so um, that process of seeing dead people was the first big wake up call. Is that awakening? Not at all. That's seeing other dimensions. That's not recognizing the truth of your
Mm.
being, as you well know, Lisa,
Mm.
but just to kind of share it with your listeners. Um,
Wow. That's
yeah,
really something like to
yeah. So there's been
suddenly
an
have
awful
that.
lot of like off the wall experiences. I've had a lot of those.
Mm.
And I suppose it's it's propelled me to be completely and totally human because there's nothing mystical that ever attracts me, I suppose. It did
Mm.
in the beginning, of course. It was like, what else is there? But is it just all this place of where people are stuck between dimensions? And I was able to talk to them. I was able to help them move on. You know, then so I started by working with people who had passed. And then I started working on people who were alive, working as an intuitive healer. I saw past lives. I saw not even believing in them. And I was like, why am I looking at this person? And here they're like stuck in a basement. Like, And it looks like a few hundred years old. It looks like Downton Abbey or something. Like, what's going on here? And then I'm like, oh my God, it's them in another lifetime. So rather than buying these ideas, I saw them. So that saved me a lot of time. I saw these things. So my way has always been, what do I know to be the truth? What do I know from my own experience? And so I've never gained things because other people said them. I'm like, okay, that's an interesting teacher. They've said that. Let's find out if it's BS or true. Let's find out.
Mm.
That's always been my way. So that inner teacher, inner guru is hugely important.
Mm.
And using a teacher as a reflection for as long as you need them, great. Using another teacher to reflect something different because everybody has a limited capacity of where they teach from. Sometimes we're not the right fit for a teacher. And so I would go to a teacher, and that was several years later because I got caught in the new age. But when I kind of got out of Ireland and moved into places where satsang were happening, I was like, oh, what's this? Oh, they're talking about the thing that I know that I thought there was no words for. Oh my God, there's language for all of this. So that was a huge help to actually bring cognitive words, intellectual, a cognitive understanding, I suppose, into what I knew. Because I would find myself sometimes at a party and saying, yeah, but none of this is real. And I'm like, what? I'm like, but I couldn't explain anything. I'm like, I just know it's not real. I just know it's not real. Yeah, but Jack, if I pinch you, yeah, it'll hurt in the movie, but it's not real. This is a movie. Like, and then, different experiences taught me different things. Like I remember coming out of a group meditation once where I was a participant. I was deep in spiritual practice at the time. And I went so far out, I went back to pure consciousness and pure consciousness, singular before there is anything in form at all. Pure consciousness can turn around and see itself. And that's when the very first idea of, oh, I can exist. Oh, I can see myself. Oh, okay. So that's one that has a capacity then to self-reflect. I don't know if I've lost people at this point, but I'm just going for it. And so, consciousness becomes aware of its own existence, and then there's space, and then there's time. And so very slowly, when I would go into deep meditation, it would take a long time for the world to reconstruct itself. So it was easy to see it was a construction. Because when the construction is peeled back, there's nothing. There's nothing. So there's nothing missing at all when there's nothing. There's nothing. So I remember coming out of a meditation, the person who was guiding us through was bringing us back. And like, of course, everybody else was like, yeah, wiggle your toes, wiggle your hands. And I'm like, space. There's only space. And then I hit up against the timeline. I was like, and I opened my eyes and I saw people getting up and rolling up their yoga mats. And I was like, I didn't even think this because my human brain wasn't there. This was me as consciousness. And I said, stop, rewind. And then unrolling, the same person unrolling their yoga mat, lying back down in a weird way, not the way we lie down, but the reverse of how we stand up. And oh, go forward and everything exactly rolled forward again, like an old VCR, rolled
Yeah.
forward again, stop, go back. Oh, oh. So, and then of course, as my brain started to, oh, look at what's happening. Of course, I was coming back in and the movie context was showing up. There was no longer consciousness playing with forward and backwards, but the Jack brain was like going, oh, holy crap. And the Jack brain, and the Jack brain was saying, like, I'm going to screw up the timeline. I'm going to, on my own, like, no, 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 don't disturb anything. Don't disturb. You're going to screw up the timeline. Maybe you get stuck outside of the timeline. And then, boom, I was here. And I was like, oh, can I do it now? Oh, not a chance. No, no, I'm just lying on the floor and everybody else is up and chatting. And okay, Jack, get your stuff together. You know? So then I'm like, okay, so now the movie is solid. Okay, now it's okay, I get it. I get it. So a lot of things happened like that. I never read
Yeah.
about them. I didn't hear them from somebody else. It was experience after experience after experience, showing it was deconstructing itself, you know?
Mm.
And I suppose I spent a few years then in India doing spiritual practice because I was like, there's nothing else to do except watch my mind and see how it wants to keep recreating something, some story of me, some semblance of a
Mm.
Jack life. And what if that is not believed at all ever? What if that stopped? So I did like a lot of spiritual practice in India. And I had nothing to do all day, every day, except watch my mind. And if that sounds like, oh, I'd love to have an opportunity to do that, I'll tell you, it's hell. It's hell. There's no break from it at all. And I remember several times having the thought, God, why isn't my path that I have a regular, normal life, or that I have kids, or that I like, why don't I have a normal life or a job or something so that I could do this for an hour once a day, but not be stuck in it 24/7? This is so hard. It was so hard. So, of course, whatever our life is, we don't like.
Yeah.
But um, over that time, I suppose, everything broke down and the believability of thoughts broke. The capacity to believe in thoughts broke as an experience. So, like, there's thoughts and there's the one who's believing them or having them. And for me, the in between, what showed up was like the credibility, the capacity to buy into thoughts. And that broke. So then thoughts come and thoughts go, but there's no solidifying that makes a me who is believing the thought.
Mm.
So thoughts haven't been believed for 17 or 18 years, maybe, you know?
Mm.
So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of the backstory.
Wow, that's amazing, Jack.
Yeah, there's
I've
been a
never
lot of
heard.
like off the
I've,
wall stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and there were so many points there that I wanted to pick up on. I needed to write down while you were speaking. Um, but what, so you said, so I don't know if this is an interesting track, but you said that it started at 30. And that's really interesting because I think that 30 is a really like dynamic time for people. I also had a massive shift at 30 and I always kind of knew it was going to be 30. And I think Jesus had the big shift at 30 and the Buddha and it's a very interesting age. And so do you want to talk about what happened at 30 to shift you into
Oh
spirituality, or
yeah,
is that massive?
yeah. I did. I did. Sorry, I didn't give a context. So I started off with the Glendalough experience. That was maybe a year and a half after the big experience. And the big experience was when I thought I had LSD in my system, but I was seeing dead people.
Uh,
That's what happened when I was 30. Just like, oh my God. And so,
and
because I was an atheist, one
did
day and then the
something
next day. Mhm.
did something trigger it? Like was there trauma or fright, or you just woke
No,
up? You're
I was
doing the
having I was
practice?
having lunch. I was having lunch with people drinking a Heineken. Literally, have Sunday lunch, drinking a can of Heineken with some friends. Yeah, away in a
Uh,
house. But the house was really old and the house was full of spooks. It was full of uneasy spirits.
and
It
you were
had been,
sensitive to
mm,
energies before that?
not that I knew of. I mean, I was an atheist, you see? So I was like, yeah, there's all this new agey stuff out there, but it's just bullshit. It's just avoidance because this is all there is, you
Yeah.
know? So,
And were you
yeah.
into spirituality or anything?
As a child, very much so. Jesus was my refuge as a child. And I studied theology, a degree in
Right,
theology. So that's where I went to in university because I wanted to find out more about God. But I found out an awful lot about Catholicism and not about God.
right,
And I threw it all aside because I was like, well, if this is what religion is, then if this is what religions do, they're about control, they're male dominated, they're forcing us to regurgitate. Like one lecturer told me that, when I was talking about something, I was like, um, yeah, the topic isn't really important. It's a bit controversial right now, so I'll leave it. But I was talking to this moral theologian, the head of moral theology, and saying, I don't see how you arrived at this conclusion. And after the tutorial, he took me outside and he said, Jack, if you want your degree, you have to stop questioning me. You have to regurgitate what we're telling you. He used that word, regurgitate what we're telling you. And I just went, okay, okay, I hear you. I hear you. So I had to make a decision. I went home to my parents and I said, I can't do this. I will never use this degree. I, I, I can't do this. And my mother said, you're not on a grant because of the kind of degree you wanted. It's not covered. We need to retire. You're the last one still in full-time education. Just finish it out. Please finish it out. So I went into college stoned every day. That was the only way I could do it. I would
Mm.
wake and bake and just go in stoned to just kind of stop my own reactivity and zip up and just say what I needed to say. And I barely got my degree. And I think it's because they were like, well, are we going to fail her or what are we going to do? Because she's not buying the Kool-Aid. I wasn't buying it. I just wasn't
Mm.
buying it. I was doing what I absolutely had to do to get over the line. I got over the line. Oh, that was probably the most phenomenal, happiest day of my life. It's like I'm out of it. I'm out of it.
Yeah.
And so it made me an atheist. I chose atheism because I couldn't separate the story
Mm.
of Jesus from the Catholic patriarchal heaviness. The control, the angst, the unhappy people that were advocating what spirituality was about. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, this is religion. And I just thought maybe there's no such thing as spirituality then. Maybe there isn't. Maybe there isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? So then like from university, from 2021 until 30, that was full on atheism,
Right.
you know? There's
Mm.
nothing except this phenomenal world,
Yeah. Yeah.
materialism, I suppose. Mm.
And and then when you had that shift, you spoke about like you were just listening to what was wanted, when you described that experience, like you're listening. Could you talk a bit more about that? Like for me, I call it like this love wants to express or move. I don't know if it's the same as and there's like different ways you can move from, and like
Yeah.
it's like this very, there's this particular energy that wants to express, but I don't know if it's the same or how it was in you.
Yes, it is now, but it wasn't at that time. At that time, I didn't feel it as love. It often came as a voice, or my physical body would move. And I'd be like, I have no idea why I'm working over here. Oh, that's why. Okay. It would be like that. And I think, my process of returning to my true nature and unplugging from the egoic patterns, believing that was me, it was very much through concepts, through understanding, through investigating. I didn't trust easily. I didn't surrender easily. My mind had been my savior for a long time, so I wasn't going to abandon it. Um, because I believed it kept me safe. There was that underpinning thing. Sure, there's moments of something else has my back, of course. But then, of course, my own habits would creep in again, as they do. It's like it's putting a crack in something and another crack
Mm.
in it. And so the movement would have been, it didn't have a feeling of love. And it was only, I suppose, for me, it was all about intellectual understanding. It's like I need to kind of work out how my brain works. I need to stop this self-referencing mechanism or surrender it, the self mechanism. And I could feel there was an incident of where I was in the shower in India of where I felt the self network. I didn't know what it was called for 3 or 4 years later, but I could feel something like short circuiting in my brain and knowing I'm this is completely destabilizing. I might end up in a psychiatric hospital in India. There's something really serious going on here. And what happened was the capacity to self-reference, to make things about me. Oh, what do they think of me? Oh, how am I being received? Like to make it about me so that that material doesn't create an egoic sense of me. That broke down. And so in these different shifts that were happening in my head, they'd settle into my body, but I wasn't down in my body yet. I wasn't. For me, it was, um, you know, I approached it because I knew that my mind was what was creating this artificial reality, is what we call it here, you know, small r reality. So it was only after I came back into the world again and was like, oh, like there was no thoughts for years, no thoughts, no dreams, no daydreams, nothing, only being present. I'd lost all of that capacity for a few years. And so I knew I have to go back into the world somehow. I remembered the day I noticed people are talking. What, what are they talking about? Why are people just talking all the time? I remember that question coming and going, oh, noticing, oh, there's a question. There's a noticing of something and there's a question. And at the same time, my nighttime dreams started to present colors. There was something other than pure blank. At this stage, I was very clean, you know. I mean, you know, there was drugs and alcohol had gone well by this point, you know. And so when I look at like the dropping back into the body, it's like things had to rearrange themselves in the world. And I had to find another way, or I was led to find another way to participate in the world. It wasn't in my destiny just to stay isolated and stay in presence 24/7 and serve from there. There was something that was pulling me back into the world. In the approach to awakening that I had, that was given to me, I suppose, the concept of love also blew up. Like the nothingness doesn't have love. There is no love there. So because I was catapulted out beyond it, and and I understood what love was. And when I see the construction of consciousness, consciousness being aware of itself, and you know, space, time, down into the particulars, the timeline, how it expands. Like when I look at the whole construction of what we call the world, you know, and our reality, in that matrix, love shows up to be movement. In the nothingness, there's nothing. There isn't even something that could move. There is no love there. So as soon as consciousness becomes aware, oh, I exist, when it moves into being aware of itself, that movement, that energy is love. And I've heard a couple of teachers talk about this, that they've found that this is true also, that that's what love is. So because I was hanging out in beyond love, for me, it was until I started re-engaging in the world and seeing how it was reconstructed and the understanding of, oh, but there's loads of movement here. Everything is moving. The cliffs are moving. They're still breaking down. Everything is moving here. Everything all the time. Oh my God. It's all run by love. That's what the movement is.
Mm.
Love is permeating everything. Love is the underpinning all of it because it's the movement part. There's nothing static here at all. Okay. So love was underneath all of it. And when that came back in, I saw then that the movement of my body going towards something, the propulsion to like walk over there. Oh, I can feel it now. I can feel it. It's not just this, you know, being kind of guided, like your body moving and your mind playing catch up, but it was like, oh, there is movement in that. There's love in that movement. Oh, and it became so much softer then. Oh my God. It became so much softer. And at that point, the importance of our humanness came back in.
Mm.
That's when it started really. That was like 2011 or 12. I'm like, okay, actually, the humanness must come back in. At the same time, I remember waking up one morning, I was in Costa Rica at the time, and like, oh my God, the connection, identification with the non-dual, identification with that's my true nature. This is the problem. This is the problem with the non-dual sector. Here it is. here it is. It's the flip side of duality. There's the non-duality. And the identification continues because that core identification with true nature is active in the non-dual. And it's not there in nothingness. It's not there. So the idea that it's my true nature, I can bring it in and bring it out, but I know it's moving material. And something about recognizing that freed up the whole stratosphere. It just freed it all up. So I seem to be able to access, I don't know, maybe it'll leave someday. I don't know. It's around for a while now. I can access many dimensions at the same time. And I'm not locked into any one. If anything, I'm looking from nothing. Do you know? It's
Mm. I,
Mhm.
I mean, like when I say yes, I mean, who knows if we really know what the other person is speaking about? Like that's really hard, but I feel
Yeah,
like I have a sense of what
yeah,
you're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's really
So
beautiful. I
now it's
find,
love. Mm.
yeah, no, so I found that so beautiful the way you described it, that the movement is love. I've never heard it put like that before.
Yeah,
Like the nearest I've ever got to speaking that out in words is that it's everything. But like, yeah, the movement, that's such a beautiful way. But you kind of like, it feels like that because you're moving in love. Like, so everything
yes,
is like this,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
this love element to it.
yes.
And it's so interesting the different stories and the different ways you teach because I had the love prior to the nothingness.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, and this really puts a different view on things. So when I came to non-duality, I didn't ever have this feeling like that non-duality teachers weren't speaking about the love. I always thought they were, because that
Yeah,
woke up before I came to non-duality. So it's so interesting the way
yeah.
it all plays out.
It's
So,
beautiful.
so, so from so 2011 or 2012, it began to change, and it began to be an integration, or what you
Yes,
say, more integration into
yes,
the human.
yes,
And I don't know if I
yes.
necessarily know what you mean by like before you were just hanging out in the nothingness. So I don't know if I necessarily understand that because maybe the way it presented here was different. So I don't know if like I
Yeah.
had that so strongly. Um, but then when the love part came in, um, yeah, how did that go? So what did that look like? So you were already teaching by then, or were you
Oh yeah.
teaching? Yeah, so you were
Oh yeah.
teaching by
Oh yeah.
then,
For several years. Yeah.
and then yeah, because I thought so because I stopped. I suppose stopped seeking or stopped when I was then maybe it was 2011. I think that before that I had watched I'd just begun to hear about you from Conscious TV. It was just becoming on the internet, and I was so remote. I
Yes.
was living in Perth at the time. So
Uh-huh.
and I was living in the bush, so we didn't really go on the internet so much. So
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
then when that happened, so you were teaching, and then how did that begin to change the way you taught and the way you interacted with your partner, say, or your friends or your students? Like what began to happen?
Yeah. So that was slow. A lot of the things were like sharp and sudden, but the love part was slow. It was like, oh, that's how it fits in. Oh, but the movement of love is slow and gentle. So
Yeah,
it's like, it didn't shake my nervous system like many, big awakenings do. That's why we give it our attention because it rattles our nervous system. But this was this balm, love is
yeah,
delicious.
yeah.
And so yeah, I suppose it's funny to kind of see, and I'm only putting it together now, somehow the detaching from seeing the identification that is advocated in non-dual teachings currently around that being your true nature, that unsticking and seeing the play between duality and non-duality, and neither of them actually present freedom. That which moves through both is love. That which is prior to both is love. And then there's prior to love, of course, that nothingness is prior to love. So with that softness coming in, it was like, oh, but this is something, this love movement goes all the way into our human desires to be loved, to act from love, to have loving friendships and relationships. Like, Why is that so connected to our sense of well-being? Ha, that stretches the whole way. Love stretches like the whole way from the first movement right through to the densest part. And when we hurt each other, really, it's the absence of love in our experience, even though love is showing up as pain too. I know that. I feel that. You know, I can understand that, how love is trying to experience its opposite, but it can't really. You know, it's still yearning for love, even when it's being hurtful, you know, and forgetting what love is, and that love is really what we're looking for, what everybody's looking for all the time. It's pretty much like that, I think. I've forgotten your question. Oh yeah, how did it change and how did my relationships change? At that point, I was dating an American guy. Um, And I ended up marrying him, and that brought me to the US. I married him in 2013, and I came to the US. And that, I suppose, those early years were very much a way of easing me back into the world, easing me back into relationships and a context and a new country and all of that. Um, it was very helpful to make me kind of, how do you do relationship now, Jack? How do you do it now? What does it look like now? And of course, it's very different anyway as we age. Um, but as I was coming back into my body, and of course, I married a guy who was structural integration, Rolfer, manual osteopath, all about body work. That was his gig, body work. So I had my in-house body worker. So bringing me into my body and finding old pockets of trauma here and like, oh, I know you're moving my knee, but I want to cry. I'm going to cry, you know, and just like, oh my God, there's a story in my cells. You know how this happens, you know? Um, and just freeing up my body. And the more that my body got free of old imprints, they were already out of my brain, but it's like some kind of the cellular memory, you know, that's where they were in my body. And so having that freed up allowed more more space to be down and in this feminine, beautiful form, you
Mm.
know, and an appreciation for the body, which had certainly left because I sacrificed my body because of the pull towards truth, because of
Mm.
extreme spiritual practice. My body didn't have anything. If my body ever asked for help, I was like, nope, that's desire. Stop, stop.
Yeah.
You know? And so there was a loving and a reintroduction to my physical form that had beautifully silenced itself, been silenced by me, and cooperated with the gig in order to bring me to a place of where, you know, the a very broad perspective could be active. So then, of course, my body, my body, my body. Okay, now let's see in this dimension of 3D dense bodies, what really is embodiment? What is that integration? And that's what was happening really, is like pulling it all into my body, deep, deep integration. And that led me away from teaching. And it led me towards um, being interested in why, what happens when people's awakening is a set of concepts and their body and their body's needs are not in any way at all connected to what they know to be the truth. Why, how are people split in this way? That,
Mm.
you know, awakening happens, but actually what I do when I'm not a teacher is completely disconnected from this. It's like, how come they haven't connected? What's that? So I started to get interested in ethics, and walking our talk, and noticing the amount of teachers who weren't walking their talk. And like, I want to understand what that is. I want to understand, because everything is a movement of love. Why is love doing that? Why is love doing that? You know, and I'm intrigued by that, and I'm still intrigued by that. And that pulled me out of teaching and pulled me into setting up with some friends the Association for Spiritual Integrity to support teachers to walk their talk, to hold their humanness so that they can grow and evolve in their humanness, to come into
mm,
their bodies and bring the teaching into every part of their lives.
mm,
And there's no support system and very few teachings about that, you know?
mm. Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's super interesting hearing your story and hearing the angle that you came from because mine was almost like the opposite way round. So it's really interesting
Yes,
hearing it
it was. Yeah.
your way around. Like,
Uh-huh.
because for me it was like the love work that woke up, and then I had to do so much of this body stuff where it was like the body started to speak. You know, you
Yes.
like. So when I went and lived with my teacher, he was like, "You got to massage your body and hear what it says." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is insane!" And then it does speak. You're like, "Oh."
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
a
Yes.
story just
Yes. Yes.
suddenly pops out of your kneecap. You're like, oh.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So
Isn't it extraordinary?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then and then I began to have the nothingness, the consciousness, and then the nothingness
Yes.
things happen. And then they
Yes.
both sort of like collided together. So it's really
Yes.
interesting hearing it the opposite way around. But I
Uh-huh.
still feel like after this sort of integration thing happened, that there is still a process of like the human
Mm,
expanding and
mm,
learning and
mm.
integrating like continuously. Like if I think
Yes.
about the conditions 10 years ago to now, like there's such more expansiveness in the Lisa character. It's very interesting.
Yes. Yes. Because
So
the human
let's,
psyche has to continue
so,
to grow. You know, the
mm,
humanness will always grow. Like we're part of
yeah,
nature. The humanness is part of the ecosystem. Our
yeah,
body is part of nature, you know?
yeah,
And so everything is birth and matures and dies and flowers and grows again and it
yeah,
recycles. And we're
yeah,
cyclical like this. So our humanness always wants to be learning and growing and it will die and get recycled, you know?
yeah. And what is interesting, so after those big things happened, like in my late 20s and when I was 30, then there was the thought that that would be the end. And then you're like, no, it carries on processing and expanding. And there
Yeah,
was like a coming to terms with that, or a like, because it all becomes very energetic as well. So you don't
yeah,
always understand things. And it's not like it comes with a manual where you're like, okay, let me just look up what happens on this page. So
yeah,
you kind
yeah,
of like
yeah,
exploring. So
yeah.
so then you got with your friends and you set up something called the ASI. And I know what
Mm,
the ASI is, but could you explain to the audience what the ASI
mm.
is and what it does? I
Yeah,
think it does a lot of things and it's evolving too, like everything else.
yeah, yeah. It is evolving too, like everything else. And it has to evolve because it's a movement, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think I've come out and said that publicly before, but it is a movement um, to bring good behavior and ethics and honesty, accountability, transparency, leaving a space for human values and authentic do no harm in the teaching culture, the spiritual teaching culture. And so what we did first was like, we need to create a code of ethics. And it took us a few years with a lot of community consultation. We work, it's a we space, you know, where community consultation happens a lot. And so we developed a code of ethics that helps everybody from like rabbis to pagans, from like, and not that they're extreme, but just for most people, it's like a leader of religious organizations to right through to you know to a coven of witches, like, and they're all signing up to the same code of ethics. So it took us a while to get something where the code of good behavior was not in was on common ground, you know, so that it could constantly evolve and we're always listening and tweaking to any feedback, but that it's a good guideline of practice for spiritual leaders. And so far, we've about 800 spiritual teachers who have, and leaders and coaches and guides and influencers who have said, okay, I want to do better. I want to do no harm, and I will commit to these 26 items, line items in the code of ethics. And it's things like, you know, refer when you're out of your depth or when there's a student that's not right for you, refer. Be honest about, you know, not getting free labor in the culture where there's a lot of save and service. Don't exploit somebody. Be kind, no matter what. Just be kind and respectful for your students' opinions. Like, it's not going to help somebody wake up by being cruel to them. It's not. It's just going to activate their nervous system. It really doesn't help. Um, and even though we have traditions of crazy wisdom where that really does knock out the ego, I'm not sure actually that it doesn't leave something else later downriver that needs to be healed, because because the surrender that's necessary in authentic awakening is all of us. That means our nervous system. That means it's the parts of us that have been traumatized by teachers and parents and all of it. So surely we can teach without re-traumatizing, surely. Um, and do teachers know the difference between being a, teaching with a sword, which I certainly did. I taught with a sword, but there's that, and then there's re-traumatizing, and there's a big difference between the two. And if we're not trauma informed, we don't know what we're doing. And so this guideline of 26 tenets is something that spiritual leaders sign up to. And what we found is that they go, oh yeah, of course, do no harm. Of course of course I won't exploit people. Of course I will, if somebody, I will abide by the law, that if I'm supposed to report something, like if somebody's telling me and they're abusing their child, I need to take action here, like, so this is all common sense. However, I have found that many spiritual leaders and teachers and guides and coaches, it's a great idea, but I don't have to change anything because I do these already. So the level of self-awareness in spiritual teaching is a real issue that we're trying to tackle. So we offer webinars every 6 weeks because, like, when you spend years in isolation or as a hermit or, in meditation, you kind of forget where the world is, how the world is moving on.
Mm.
And you get out of practice of, like, how to exchange respectfully, what's active listening, what's empathetic listening, what's nonviolent communication, what are these things that have all happened and are continuously evolving? What's the right use of power in every situation? Do I drop the role of being teacher in the evening when I go home? Like, am I the teacher all the time? Do I have people who don't actually know what I do and I trust them deeply as friends? Do I have, or am I always the teacher? Because that does things to our brain. If we are in the role of teacher all the time, it actually does things to our brain, and it disconnects us from being able to listen empathically. It stops us communicating in a soft, loving human way. So, like, there's a lot of information that we don't have as spiritual leaders because we're not now in the ashrams and monasteries. We're making babies and marrying people, and we're living lives, as well as embodied awakening in our daily existence. So there's a lot of education around our humanness that's needed. And all of us are learning, like all of us. We even have harm and conflict response plan within the volunteers. We're all volunteers in the ASI, except for a very minimal fee that's given to one administrator. And we have all signed a document saying, I will do my best to do no harm with everybody I'm in touch with through the ASI. And so constantly, there is an open door for somebody to give you feedback and saying, well, that was really hurtful, that comment, or wish you didn't say that. And I'm like, okay. And I have found now that, if students could say this to teachers, it's like, I don't want to be treated like that. If they could stay in their power, they would have much more autonomy for their own spiritual growth. So I see it like maturing the spiritual leadership culture away from the high priest on the pinnacle who's close to God to, like, God is all of us, is everything, or love is, or consciousness is. They're kind of the same thing, really. And so how do we honor the humanness and bring that with us as we awaken?
Mm.
And so yeah, improving practices so that, like, so the teachers use feedback forms so that there's always a way to communicate, so that students have their power, and that
Mm.
it's respected, that their humanness is respected. So, the absence of teachers not having a place to share safely with other teachers, with other leaders, with peers and colleagues. We've done 2 pilots to find a really effective peer support structure for spiritual teachers. I think we have it now. We've done everything wrong I think we could do wrong, and that's how we learn.
Yeah.
Um, and we're doing it now. We have somebody now who's setting up a system. It'll be ready in September. And right now, actually next week, so that will be for teachers to have a very specific environment to get support for their humanness and drop the role of teacher. Um, so that's ready to go. There's something that we're advertising actually next week is a pilot program of supports for students who have left abusive teachers, communities, or cults, or who are in the process of leaving. So that's
Mm.
another small group that will be run by somebody who's really experienced that we're communicating with, and she's going to run support groups for that. So there's a lot of different kind of initiatives that we're doing, but there's webinars every 6 weeks. Everybody can come; they're free. We just ask, like, donate if you can.
Mm.
And we always bring in somebody different to talk about something. Like we had 2 earlier this year on psychedelics, and like, let's talk about the psychedelic movement and where do we sit with it. And there's no code of ethics for psychedelics, and there's a lot of bad
Mm.
practices, a lot of abuse happening through the psychedelic ceremonial use. So it's like, okay, there's a role we can play there in giving more information. You can just give more
Mm.
information so the students are more prepared,
Mm.
And I think if students had more power and more autonomy, and we had support for the teachers at the same time to deal with that feedback, because nothing in our awakening shows us about ethics. Nothing, nothing. It doesn't help us to the changes that happen in our brain, especially when we live an isolated life, they disconnect us from people. So we know that from neuroscience. So, like, how can we support the teachers and encourage students to give constructive feedback, not transferring, not projecting, you're my parent, you're supposed to love me all the time, not projecting that relationship. Can we mature the whole culture of spiritual leadership? That's the movement. Can we
Yeah.
mature it and bring it into kind of emotional maturity so that it can be something um, that is healthier for both
Yeah.
teacher and student?
Yeah, that's really beautiful, but it's such a difference to this, like this like I forgot what you called it, like crazy wisdom. Like
Yes,
when you read,
yes,
like in a lot of Indian gurus or teachers, it's
yeah,
such a contrast, but also the West is very different from India. Like
yes,
it is a very different
yes,
culture, like you say,
yes,
coming over and teaching in the West. But yeah, it's really fascinating, and I'm really happy that it's there and that people have opportunity to do
yeah,
that. Like I had some really positive feedback about the student and teacher. What do you call that? Mediation.
yes,
Yeah. It was
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes we bring in a mediator between both, but we have an external team of 2 who meet with the student and meet with the teacher and kind of say, well, what was going on for you? What was the learning for you? Both of them. They're 2 individuals here, and there's a dynamic. So let's talk about both and see how could it happen differently, or what's to be learned from this. And sometimes it goes to mediation. Yep.
And do you notice a difference between the way that women receive the ASI and the way that men receive the ASI? Like, because just saying that, is it easier for women teacher to acknowledge their part in it, or men, or is there no difference, or how does that look?
Um,
And the
m-
embodiment of it, yeah.
mm, mm. More more communication from student comes in about men.
Mm.
Um, we've never asked people what their gender is, so I'm just kind of judging, when membership comes in, like there is some, non-binary, sexual, we don't say male, female, or other, or we don't categorize in any way. And so what I do know, though, is when a complaint comes in and we have a look to see who the teacher is, then I can see what sex they are. And most would be men. And most complaints are about misuse of power. And men can be extremely defensive. Women, not so much. The response of the teacher when the student is saying something to them is different, in my
Mm.
opinion, from the men and the women. The women like, oh my God, what did I do? Uh, so they question, they doubt themselves. Where men, we even had a man recently who wanted to bring a legal rep,
Oh,
to
uh,
counsel.
I see, like a male teacher.
Yeah, he wanted to bring somebody in. The male teacher wanted to bring somebody else in case this went legal.
Mm.
Like, that is so not the world of the ASI. We're like, how can we support each other's humanness so that we can be kind to each other and do less harm? That's what we're
Yeah,
about. It's like the law, like what? It's like I
yeah,
went, oh my God, can you imagine? A member of the ASI thought that this could go legal. Like, now a woman I would be really surprised if any woman would say that, would think, oh God, somebody has made a complaint about me, about my work to the ASI. I better get an attorney.
yeah,
That's not where a woman goes. A woman goes into self-doubt. Where did I go wrong? She gets sensitive. She will blame herself. She might project onto the student. Um, but she'd be very soft about it and
mm,
apologetic. Rarely does a man get there. Rarely. It's usually, well, this is the way I do it. If they don't like my teaching, they can go someplace else. That
yeah,
tends to be an attitude that's in men and that's not in women.
yeah. I mean, I would say, like, if I just say about myself, like,
Yeah.
I would unfortunately say that after 12 years of teaching, undoubtedly I have misused power. Like
Yes.
I,
Yes.
and mostly from ignorance. It's not really my personality that like is like, let's have power. Like it's not,
Yes.
I'm more of a
Yes.
hermit type that's like, oh, that's too much. If I were to
Mm.
suck all in them, like,
Yes.
so it's
Yes.
more through ignorance. And I know
That's
that
right.
there will be students out there in which that's happened to. And it's,
That's
yeah, it
right.
breaks my heart because it's not an
Yes.
intentional thing, but
That's
it's
right.
ignorance. You just like 12 years ago, 10 years ago is
Yes.
such a different, like, yeah, different
Yeah.
landscape now. Like, there's so
Yeah.
much more informed about trauma, about,
That's right.
yeah, just the way you relate or teach or speak. There's so much more information out
That's
there.
right.
And
That's
I
right.
feel like a lot of women would be able to acknowledge that, that if you've been
Yeah.
teaching for 12 years,
Yeah.
there's gonna be times where your responsive haven't been appropriate. You know, it's just,
Absolutely. We've all done it.
yeah.
Like, we've all done it because we didn't know any better. You nailed it. The landscape was very different then. And like, this is what the West brings. It brings human rights into a different type of a paradigm. Human rights that support with psychology, with transpersonal psychology, with neuroscience. Whereas the ancient teachings were protected within a caste system, within a
Mm,
hierarchy that was very patriarchal. It preserved the teachings, but like if East meets West, the teachings and psychology can work beautifully. And that's around let the human part be involved in the exchange and let it be honored with love and kindness. And people are so much more receptive when their nervous system is calm. And it will expedite the awakening process. It will, because it's safe and surrender is allowed and you're respected. So the guarding will stop. The tightness, the contraction will be less.
mm, mm,
I think it's a win-win, and we have to do this. We need to move with our times. It's been too long. And
mm,
lack of information and like you know, I have one foot, I suppose, in an attempt to find funding for the ASI, to get core funding for the ASI. Set up an education department. That is my primary goal. Set up an education department, you know, so that there's places for teachers to get high quality courses. Like when we were looking for a peer support model, and I looked in industry and not for profit and voluntary organization, I'm like, dang, none of these models work. Spiritual leaders are a particular type of sector.
Mm,
And so, like, training around how we use the power and the status that you're given as a spiritual leader, that's very particular for us too. So we need to create education programs that are appropriate for us
mm,
because of the culture of spiritual leadership, because of what we've inherited, you know?
mm. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that is incredibly complicated.
Yeah.
And yeah, it
And
takes
really
years
exciting.
and years. Yeah, really exciting, but years and years to
Yeah.
find things. And then always this adjustment and this expansion of like what fits better. And then
That's right.
we're going into such a different landscape again now with the AI. And also,
Yeah.
people have changed since COVID. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I feel like people's nervous systems are more aroused since COVID. And I think it's a combination of the phone and um,
Mhm.
and then also this COVID period, but it's this build up of many years now of people using the phone. And I feel
Yeah.
like people are a lot more, yeah, aroused in their nervous system.
That's right.
And a lot of
Yeah.
people I come across, they really need to settle down their nervous system, but they don't listen
Yes.
often, like of
Yes.
how important that is. Like
Yes.
to, because if your
Yes.
nervous system is really aroused, then everything you're going to do in spirituality will be about that. You know, you're
That's
trying
right.
to calm that down.
Yes.
It sometimes can really fire it up,
Yeah.
not calm it down.
Absolutely. That's a great point. I totally agree with you. Yeah. And
So
it's
what
getting
about,
worse, you know,
yeah,
because
I
of,
think it's
yeah,
going to
it
get
is getting
worse.
worse. Mm,
Yeah. And this
yeah.
is why the island that you're on is so amazing energetically, I can imagine, because you're
It is.
not in such like a digital energy.
No, not at all.
But
We
yeah,
cycle bicycles and
yeah,
walk to the beach. And yeah, there's not a lot of people stuck on their phones, you know.
yeah.
No, different culture.
And so for me, like, so if we go back to ethics and for me, like one of the most important things that my teachers taught me and something that is always um, prevalent in my heart is that everything is here to help me expand. So everything I come into contact with, good or bad, abusive or friendly, like I always like it's that old-fashioned. If you get a lemon, you make lemonade. It's like this really, yeah, it was such a big teaching from my teachers, and just really has always stayed here. That everything I use to expand, no matter what it is. And so
Mm.
how would you see that with the ASI? Like, and would that just be not something that you bring in, or because that also I can see if people have been traumatized or damaged by spirituality, that could be in contradiction and painful to.
I don't understand how.
So if people are coming and they've had
Mm,
difficult experiences or they're coming out of cultish situations,
mm, mm.
like how would those sit next to each other? Would is this seen as an idea that's really not appropriate? Like I wouldn't say that to somebody that came to me and has received abuse. I would speak to them about going to experience
Mm,
um,
mm.
to a therapist that works on abuse because I
That's
think
right.
that that could
That's
damage them
right.
more. However,
That's
it's the
right.
fundamental of my experience is that everything is about that.
Yes.
Like
Yes. That's
it's
right.
God is
That's right.
always offering me like
Yeah.
the opportunity to merge more and more. So I just
Yes.
wonder like how that would
Yes.
sit together for you as having spoken about non-duality and now being deeply
Yeah.
involved in ASI.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a perspective when something when something awful is happening and we're in the pain body and we're in the experience. the perspective where you can see that there is a silver lining, this is for your expansion, that's closed off. And it needs to be closed off because if it wasn't, we would avoid going into the pain and healing it. So we don't have that perspective when we're in deep pain. Like, let's say we're in an abusive, cultish type organization and we're trying to get out and you'd be ostracized for leaving. That's always the punishment. Um, when you're in that, you can't do anything but go deeper into it and feel every part of it and heal it and find support systems to get out of it safely. That's going to take 100% of your attention. And so when you're out of it and you heal, you get to see, oh, that happened. Wow, I can see now what I've learned from it. I can see now how it was necessary and it expedited everything. And like, my God, the wisdom I got from it, it was awful, but the wisdom of it almost made it worth it. And sometimes, yes, it did. And sometimes maybe could have been a bit easier, but the learnings were so deep, you
Yeah.
know? But that takes time afterwards where we can see the bigger picture of what was going on for our soul's journey.
Mm.
When we're in it, we got to be in it. We got to be in it and do the best thing we can to heal and to move out of it. And that's kind of one of the reasons we're setting up that group, you know, um, with an experienced therapist. That's the woman who's going to be facilitating the groups. She's really good
Yeah.
in working in the spiritual domain, and she's a therapist for years and years. So she brings the two together because there's a time when that's what you got to do
Yeah.
is you're learning about your humanness of like, okay, what do I need to do to feel strong enough and have the courage to change my situation? When you're
Yeah.
out of it, it's like, wow, oh my God, look who I am now. Holy moly, I would never fall for something like that again. Oh my God, look what I
Yeah.
learned. Look at the
Yeah.
naivete that had to mature, you
Mm.
know? So there's a time
And
for
it's
everything.
yeah, it's hard. It's a hard one to explain to people because when you're recovering from abuse, you have to allocate
Mm.
blame. But
Yeah,
then at the same time, then there's a point where you have to see what blame is and and question blame, but you can't question blame when you have to allocate blame because
there we
in order
go.
to heal, you have to allocate blame. You know, you have to say, okay, this person did this to me to
Yes,
heal it. And then
yes,
after that healing's happened, then you can question what blame is or what separation is and
that's
whose
right.
blame is. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. There's a time for everything.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah,
difficult
yeah.
when people are in it to kind of encourage that because they want to go to the no blame, which is often part of the trauma. Not,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's spiritual bypassing too. Oh, there's no
Yeah.
judgment. There's no judgment. And like, actually, could you give yourself permission to really judge and
Yeah.
go right in there and to be very unspiritual and totally human, maybe? And
Yeah.
and it frees everything up, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
We use all kinds of things to avoid, and spirituality too, to avoid,
Mm.
you know? Yeah. It's interesting work, Lisa, isn't it? This
Yeah.
spiritual leadership. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, far out, that is like a whole new teaching in itself. Like,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's really something to
yeah.
teach.
Do you love it as much as you used to a dozen years ago?
Um, I think even more because
Mm.
um the Lisa character is more settled with it, more um,
Mm.
not like she's not trying to sort it out, organize it, or there's there's more of a flow. Like at first,
Mm.
it's a confusing thing because at first you have this and this energy wants to speak through of like maybe this very absolute non-duality or this very radical non-duality, and then you've got the human stuff that you're dealing with the other people, and so there's this, I suppose, integration part that happens. So now it's more, um, that's more out of the way now. So it's more like, feels like for me often that I'm kind of having a love affair with people when I'm speaking about the subject. But um, yeah, so it's very beautiful. And I really now reference off a lot, so I won't do much talking about too much going into stories or too much going
Yeah.
into what I used to call seeking patterns. So I'll talk a little bit
Yes.
about seeking patterns and habits and conditions, but now I reference it off, like so I won't
Yes.
go there too much.
It's beautiful. It's
Yeah,
beautiful that it feels like a love affair.
yeah.
Yeah.
What about for you?
Dabble.
Do you still teach?
No, no.
None.
I see some private clients and I enjoy that. Um, yeah, the private practice just continues. Um, but no, I stopped enjoying it. I could feel the passion just shifting into the Association for Spiritual Integrity. It's like that's what I want to do. That's my dharma. And
Yeah.
so I closed down the teaching a few years ago, and I've never looked back.
Oh
Yeah,
wow. Yeah.
yeah. It's nice
So
not to
you
teach.
spend your days working for the ASI
I
or
do.
and
I do.
in
Three
yourself?
mornings a week, I see private clients, and the rest of the time, I'm with the ASI. Yeah.
Oh,
I
nice.
like the not traveling though. I like not traveling because you're always on the road, with teaching.
Yeah.
And I really like that stopped. I just want to be
Yeah.
here, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when you find a place that's a really strong energy, I haven't been there, but I imagine it, then just to totally melt into that.
Yeah,
See.
that's right. That's right.
And just one more question. We'll just go,
Mhm.
if it's okay, just go on for a little bit more till
Yeah.
maybe half past, and then that's enough. Um, but so, uh, so what you were saying when we messaged each other about women teachers, but maybe it's a
Mm,
bit too broad a subject. Like it fascinates me the unpopularness of women teachers in non-duality. That
yeah.
fascinates me, like how there
Hmm.
are female non-duality teachers out there,
Mm,
and there's some that are more
mm,
popular. The ones that tend to be more popular, the ones that are more extreme non-duality.
hmm.
Like
Hmm.
there's
I agree.
Gangaji, but then it really fascinates me how. And one thing that I would be happy for you to contradict is that one thing I think is that women play a role in this because I think that I'm not sure about non-duality, but I think generally overall in spirituality, it's women that are the biggest audience, and I get the feeling that it is also in non-duality. And it just fascinates me because it's the audience which is making the male teachers so popular and I mean like the male teachers are so popular in comparison to the female teachers.
Yes. Yes.
Um, I just wondered, I know it's a big subject to bring up in the last minutes, but like what your
Yes.
opinions or thoughts on that was.
Well, women in leadership is not something that's normalized yet in our cultures, in our Western cultures. Mm, There's never been a female president in the US, for example.
Yeah.
There's been two in Ireland, and in the UK. But I think I think we're looking at a deeper issue there of where the authority is supposed to come from a male is very deep in our psyche. Like we say he, we genderize God, you know, Jesus, the Buddha. There were so many amazing women through the years,
Mm.
but they were destroyed, tortured, burned at the stake. We were not allowed to do it. Like women were running medicine for so long, for thousands of years. And once it was discovered that like, oh, let's men should take this over. Women are getting too powerful. So we were murdered and men took over medicine. And look at where it is. So like this kind of thing has been happening, like paintings where men are clothed, but women are like just sexualized. So we're not seen, like I remember talking to a spiritual leader um, who showed up at a webinar at the ASI, and he said, I just, can you just make women like who come to my satsang wear clothes that are not so revealing? It's really distracting. And I got such a shock I couldn't say anything. Um, but it's amazing that a male teacher didn't want to take charge of his own thoughts, didn't see it as something to heal within him, but that we were the problem because of the clothing we wore. Um, and I find that sickening. I find it sickening. Yeah. Um, where do we start with that? Where do we start? You know, that men enjoy, they just enjoy this status because they never earned it. They didn't have to do anything for their sexual bodies. Like they were born with it. That is a status they did not earn. And we get punished because we are women. You know, it is even in the art world. You know, I was talking to a really good international visual artist. Um, she's had global recognition, and I was looking at her work in her studio last November, and I said, "So what's it like being a woman?" And she just said, "I have to prove myself at every show. That's how it works." And I've spoken to many spiritual teachers. Every gig, I have to prove myself again. With a guy, once he proves himself, then people will take that and he will have more status and more status. People go to male shows, even women who own galleries don't want to promote women's work because more people will come to see male artists' work. And so the women are always trying to get into the first rung. It's like that in spirituality too.
Mm.
Oh, like, I've listened to it throughout my teaching career as well, around kind of the the lack of the assumption that your awakening isn't as deep as a man's, the
Mm.
assumption, you know? And it's quite the opposite, actually. In many cases, our female bodies have oriented us to be more in touch with the embodied part of awakening, with the coming back in and walking your talk. That's what I mean by embodied, is like, are you bringing the teachings through in how you eat and how you meet the mailman and or male woman, whatever it is, the man part is everywhere, even in my own brain. Like, how do we walk the talk? And that is something that women are closer to because men have more to lose. They have more to
Mm.
lose because they're given status and have much larger audiences because they are men.
Mm.
Because, there are so many religions where men have the higher status, so many. So deep in our unconscious is truth will come from a man. You know, there was an Indian spiritual leader whom last month, it was in April, um, who said, well, women, because of their hormones, find it much more difficult to wake up. It's like, I question that one.
Yeah, estrogen is so amazing. It's so loving and orgasmic. Like,
It's extraordinary. It's like, oh dear. Oh dear. If anything, we have the advantage, if anything, because we're so much in touch with the fullness. And we like because I had a very cerebral awakening and then in came the body. For women, it goes the opposite way. You're more typical of a woman's path, Lisa, you know? And it would be really good for men to open through their heart. But it's more difficult for them because men are not, we need more men who can model the depth and courage it takes to operate from love.
mm.
And it is seen as weak, it is seen as vulnerability is unsafe because they've too much to lose, because they're so interested in power. The ones who are at the top are interested in power. I see it, I hear it in what they're saying. It's like, and it's like what you said earlier, they don't know any better. They just don't know any better. So, if there's people who identify as men listening to this, can you stay in your body? Can you give more time to women's messages and try not to dismiss them because they're women? and try to feel and engage that part of your system so that you approach this, your spiritual maturity and wisdom with all of you, with all of you. This would be really beautiful to have
Mm.
more men speak to this.
Mm. Yeah, and can you say I don't know? Like love can say I don't know.
Yes,
Like,
yes, yeah.
yeah, that's really beautiful, Jack. And I would actually love to go on. Maybe we do a part two because this is
Yeah,
really like fascinating, but
it is.
it's a bit,
It's
yeah.
meaty.
But just as an ending, like, do you have any advice for audiences of how to support the more feminine expression of this, or the more like, so what to look for, or maybe like, yeah, what they could, because it's the audience in the end that is determining
Yeah,
the the
yeah,
teacher. So what it is they can look out for in themselves, or what
yeah.
discernment is happening. If I'm
To
some
increase
sort of, yeah,
self-awareness.
yeah, around this.
Yeah, to increase self-awareness. I think, you know, can I say all of us or close to all of us support um, status being given to men? And it's it because that status is not earned. It is culturally given. So let's be aware of the status that we give men and we give women in our own lives. Like, just notice you're watching the news. Is it male or is it female? Do you believe more what's said when it's a male person giving the news? How do you feel when a female is giving the news or watching the weather? Like, do things like that. You can watch your own mind, and you can watch your own filters, being more readily absorbing what men do as correct, but being willing to question and pull down women and criticize women. Just watch it. When you're on the street, it's like, okay, on this walk up this street, I'm going to notice people's clothing. Am I going to criticize women and how they look before I criticize men? Let's just see. Let's just see where my criticism goes.
Mm.
Because women pull each other down.
Mm.
And men put themselves under pressure to be the dude, to be the guy, to be the strong one. And so for men to be aware of that, and women, how they pull each other down instead of lifting each other up. Lift up women everywhere, both
Mm.
men and women, to lift up women, to start to redress the balance.
Yeah,
Things like this we can do.
yeah,
But each of us is holding the glue in place to keep this imbalance around sexuality in place. We're all
yeah,
responsible
yeah, yeah. In every area, yeah, yeah. It was really
in every
sweet the other day. This putting up like this lady that was coming to help my mom. She'd come 2 weeks, and then there was 2 weeks gap, and I don't think she's into this subject or anything like this. And she was like, "Do you know, 2 weeks ago, I didn't say to you that I liked your hair, and then afterwards, I beat myself up. I should have just told her I liked her hair." And I just like I wanted to say, like, my mom started talking, and I just wanted to say, like, how beautiful it is to for us women to do this to each other. Like we often forget to like really appreciate the other woman,
Yes,
out of our own
yes,
insecurity or shame or just
yes.
this prejudice. And I just like
That's right.
so appreciated her coming back and saying that and admitting that like this
Yes,
I
that's
went away and
beautiful.
went, why not? Why wouldn't I say that? That I liked it.
Good. She
And
saw
I,
it. She
yeah, and
saw
I
it.
know I get that sometimes. Like I appreciate something of a woman, and then I'm shy to say it. And then sometimes when I do say it, it comes out too over the top. I'm like, oh well, it's a
Better to have it
balance.
out and
Yeah,
over the top
yeah,
than not at all. Yes. It's trial
yeah,
and error, when we're breaking a
yeah,
pattern.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, nice. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Jack, for coming and
Oh, that
sharing
was
with us.
so much fun, Lisa. That
Yeah,
was
I
so,
would.
my God, we covered so much ground.
Yeah, we
Beautiful.
did. I would love to speak more about the last part at another point,
Yeah.
but gets a bit long after an hour and a half. But yeah. Hey, thank you so much. I'll just stop the recording now. Yeah, I really appreciate you. And I'll link everything below. Is there anything you want to advertise or say? Um,
No, just just become more self-aware, really, and see how you're plugging into society structures of the value of men and the value of women. That would be really important. Even if you're, you don't identify as either male or female, how do you plug in to the roles of male and female? How do you do it? How do you see them? That would be really a really good thing to do. And then, like, if you're a spiritual leader, join the ASI and get support so that you can be
yeah,
better at what you
yeah,
do, be better at managing yourself. Um, yeah. And I
yeah.
have a private practice. If anything I've shared is going to be of help to people, I've
Oh,
got pretty good
you still
extra.
take on some clients as well.
I do. I do. I do. I used to
Okay.
work with teachers only for a couple of years, and then this year I'm like, okay, I can expand this a bit. So yeah,
Okay.
I do. I do. I work with private clients. Yeah, I do.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll link that below for everybody and I'll put it in the information box that's on the screen somewhere. I think on the right side. Yeah. Yeah, nice.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you
Lisa.
so much, Jack. I just stopped the recording now.